All right, let's go, everybody. I don't know where my Tavern mug is, so I've got my I don't know, wannabe mug here. But sorry, I'm late. I'm trying to trying to catch up with it all, and there's actually there is some good news. There is definitely some bad. Unfortunately, tonight I'm going to spend more time on the ugly than I do anything else because I got to catch up on a bunch of these horrible court decisions. There just seems to be all of a sudden, just like one right after the other over the last 6 or 7 days of these crazy district court level decisions. There was at least one semi. In fact, let me see if I can pull up a couple of these. I had a whole list ready to go and lost my list. But there is a growing trend of these district court judges that think they're gods. I mean, it's been that way for. I think you could say it really started getting bad about probably 30 years ago, and it's just gone downhill from there. Now, Trump has been willing to call it what it is. He's been willing to push back. And as we've talked about here at the Tavern many times, the Supreme Court, shockingly, has been willing in the last year to slap down some portions of Article 3, the courts, and its authority to do certain things. So I think a lot of this stuff that's happened in the last week will likely get overturned on appeal. The problem is the timing. So you've got these indictments. Let's just start there. These indictments of James Comey and Letitia James, now dismissed by a federal judge. I mean, this is well, let me back up. Let me say there is a role, obviously, to prevent injustice and abuse of the courts and abuse of prosecution. Obviously, this role of the courts was completely lost and buried somewhere for the 4 years of the Biden administration as they used the courts to persecute and destroy the lives of thousands of people with no help from judges. There was no due process. There was no ability for people, even in many cases, to get their day in court. They spent years in solitary confinement. They spent years being abused and moved from prison to prison to prison to make it more and more difficult on their family to try to break them. I mean, every trick in the book was used. And normally that would be a proper role of a judge to stand in the way of that and to receive the complaint of the defendant or the person that's being abused and step in and stop that from happening in America. That is a proper role of a judge, no doubt. And so that's, of course, what the left is going to claim is happening here, that these district judges are preventing the Trump administration from getting revenge on their political opponents using the Department of Justice. Now, of course, that's laughable to anyone that paid any attention over the last 5 years, especially the previous 4 years, all 4 years of the Biden administration. The Otto Penn administration. I don't think we should call it the Biden administration, but I just think it's clearly hypocritical. It's laughable. But we're used to it, right? This is what the left does. They accuse you of doing what they are actually doing. And so for the 4 years of the Otto Penn administration, there was a complete loss of due process and justice in our country. And our federal agencies were weaponized. They were used against our citizens with no relief from the courts. The only relief that came was thank you, God, for President Trump not only winning the election, but being willing on day one to pardon those J6 defendants and end the nightmare. So I just want to say that up front to acknowledge that, yes, it is a proper function of a federal judge to stop persecution that is meant for revenge. So, of course, the left's going to claim that about James Comey and Letitia James. But then when you look at the fine print, that's not at all what they were claiming in court in terms of what got a foothold. I mean, obviously, the defending attorneys were always going to claim this is just retribution against these people because they went after Trump. Now, is it retribution? I think they deserve retribution. I think they deserve a taste of their own medicine, especially if there's fault. So, I don't think anybody has defended Letitia James for her mortgage fraud. I think pretty much everybody has said, yeah, she committed fraud. The evidence is pretty clear. She did so to get a better rate and all this stuff. And so the facts are definitely against her for conviction. So she should be prosecuted regardless of who the president is, who has control of the DOJ, all of those things. In fact, it's more important to prosecute her because of what her position was. Otherwise, you continue to get this rules for me, rules for thee, but not for me, and a perception that is reality, frankly, in the minds of the American people, that the justice system is broken, doesn't work anymore, doesn't work for the elites, that they use it to go after us, but they get free reign. By the way, if you don't have any Patriot Brew coffee, you need to get some. PatriotBrew.com. It's the best coffee on the planet, and it supports Patriot Academy. Okay, so it's very ugly right now in the judicial system, because now that you have legitimate cases against both Comey and Letitia James. I mean, James is a little, frankly, easier. It's an obvious case. It really should be a slam dunk case. Comey's is a little bit different, just from the standpoint of there's all this. There's the 5-year statute of limitations, and the timing, of course. I think, again, Pam Bondi dropping the ball. They should have done this stuff a lot faster when they got in on any of them that had a short statute of limitations like this, or where it was coming to an end. And a lot of that's going to happen quickly in the next few months with regard to the J6 committee and some of these other areas where there absolutely should be. You can call it retribution. I call it justice. It's just justice. It is not wrongful retribution to prosecute someone when they're guilty of something. Just because they had prosecuted you for things doesn't give them a blank check for the rest of their life. And that's kind of what the left is going to almost claim here, is that you can't go after any of these people that did all these evil things in America for the last 4 years, because it will be perceived as retribution by President Trump. Thankfully, President Trump isn't bothered by any of these claims. Doesn't bother him one bit when people say he's just getting vengeance or retribution or whatever. He's going to keep saying the same thing I'm saying right now, which is, if they did something wrong and justice calls for them to be prosecuted, then I'm going to tell my DOJ to prosecute, and for sure not prosecute in order to protect my reputation. Like, that's a more statesman-like position than it would be to actually not prosecute. Oh, I don't want to look bad. So, that's what a politician does. A patriot says, no, do the right thing, even if it costs me politically. And I think that's what President Trump has done in these cases. So the Comey thing, though, because of the statute of limitations, it's going to be weird. I just thought this was one of the things that I wanted to point out. That's definitely, at the very least, on the bad side, but I think even on the ugly side. So, all right. So Comey's attorneys, they are claiming that this prosecutor for the DOJ, who I think got the job just a few days before the statute of limitations ran. I'll be honest, I haven't read any of the pleadings. I'm not way down deep in the details. I'm just reading the press reports, which puts me in a vulnerable position for being very wrong on some of this. So I will gladly be corrected. I just haven't had time to dive into those. So the things I'm commenting on are more in general with regard to justice, due process, and then in this case, total hypocrisy. Listen to what the judge said. He said that this prosecutor, let's see, what's her name, Halligan, that her appointment was defective, and so he ruled that all of her actions in her role, quote, constitute unlawful exercises of executive power and must be set aside, that she had no legal authority. Trying to think of a similar situation. Trying to think of I don't know, maybe an executive authority being exercised whenever there was no lawful authority, or they let's see, what was I got to go back to this phrase. Oh yeah, that the position was quote unquote defective. I don't know, maybe like an auto pen, actually signing executive orders and pardons. Certainly doesn't have authority to do that. It's a machine. Staff certainly doesn't have the authority to do that. But frankly, I think all of this language fits for a defective president, an unelected president, a president that was elected in a stolen election. Now, I said after January 20th that, hey, once Congress signs off, they have now made an illegitimate president legitimate. So I still to this day blame Republicans in Congress for not pressing the gas and following through on what Ted Cruz and Josh Hawley were trying to do. And yes, the left tried to destroy them for simply following the Constitution. But I still think it's ironic that the language used by this judge, that her appointment is defective, and therefore all of her actions in that role constitute unlawful exercises of executive power and must be set aside because she had no lawful authority. Well, man, what if we applied that to everything Joe Biden did for the 4 years of his presidency? I mean, there are certainly arguments and even efforts to say that a lot of his pardons were unlawful, that they were defective. They were unlawful exercises of executive power because they were done by auto pen and people in the staff who had no lawful authority to do that. So I don't know. I think this decision could come back to haunt the left if we will do what we should do, which is absolutely throw the book at them every chance we get and not back off, maybe because we've lost some of these battles, or in this case, potentially a temporary setback. I don't know that the Comey indictment can be corrected because of the statute of limitations. I'm not a criminal lawyer. I don't practice that stuff. And so I'm sure there's some way around it, but maybe not. Letitia James, on the other hand, her statute of limitations has not run. And so whatever this business of Halligan being, not appointed, in a proper way or so, I don't even know what the technicality is there about her appointment, but apparently there's something there. And so definitely technicalities, but has nothing to do with the facts of the case, whether or not Letitia James committed fraud, whether or not James Comey lied to Congress. I mean, these criminal acts by these people still have to be held accountable. So I don't, I don't know where all that's going to go, but I just think it fits into the category of what I wanted to talk about tonight, which is, courts gone wild, these courts out of control. And in this case, this judge, tossing these indictments without even, giving the prosecution a chance to move forward in what is clearly a case where there is a case. Again, a judge should step in whenever a local DA or in this case, the Department of Justice is abusing their power. I don't see how anybody can claim that the Department of Justice is abusing their power to go after what are clearly crimes by James Comey and by Letitia James. I think we should be saying that they're doing the opposite of abusing their power. They're not using their power enough. There's not enough indictments. I know. I said I'd wait till after the end of the year. I'd give them to the end of the year before I start whining about they're not moving fast enough, because we did airdrop them behind enemy lines. It's going to take them time to get there. All right, there was a whole bunch of other decisions. I mean, we've got court decisions saying that President Trump can't make D.C. safe. Well, that's an ignorant judge that is completely ignoring the Constitution itself, which gives the federal government authority over Washington, D.C. Technically, Congress is the one that has authority, but Congress has delegated that authority. They've delegated it a couple of directions. They've delegated some of it to a city government, and then they've delegated some of it to the president as the executive. And so just throwing out the idea that President Trump does not have the power to bring peace, even if it's not under the Insurrection Acts or any of the other areas that he arguably has authority to do this type of thing, even if it's just the fact that the federal government should be taking over D.C. So I think the solution here is for Congress to overrule this federal judge's opinion and take back every bit of the control in D.C. Get rid of the city government in Washington, D.C., and get it back to what the Constitution says, which is that Congress should be ruling D.C. Congress absolutely has the power to do that. There should be a committee in Congress that governs Washington, D.C. That's the way it was designed under the Constitution, and we need to go back to that. And congressmen, get off your rears and do your job. I mean, that's part of what Congress should be doing, instead of delegating it off to this local city government that is absolutely woke and crazy and allowing all of this crime to take place. And let's not forget that when President Trump brought some level of peace to Washington, D.C., even the mayor had to finally admit, this is working, and I'm glad he's here. But here we're reversing it again. And then you've got judges saying that the president can't deport fastly. He needs to be deporting vastly faster. That's what I was wanting to say. These judges, saying there's not enough due process for these illegal aliens. They don't get due process. Okay, at the most, they should get a very quick 3-minute hearing where our department, our Homeland Security, can quickly show this person is not a legal citizen here, has never been invited in, has never been given asylum or authority to be here. And if given asylum has been revoked by the federal government, which it has the right to do at any time, and send them home. I mean, this is crazy. There should be 10 million deportations. And they're going, I think, as fast as they think they can. And now you've got judges slowing it down again. Again, the judges have zero say in this. This is not about the judiciary. The president of the United States very clearly has constitutional authority to enforce the borders, to enforce the law. That is literally the definition of executing the law under Article 2. So he needs to be executing the law and getting rid of these people, getting them out of our country, sending them home, or putting them in a camp on the other side of the border in Mexico. Yes, I think we should absolutely invade our southern neighbor who allowed this to happen and take 10, I don't know, 5 square miles, I don't know, however much space we need for a green zone, and put all of these illegal aliens there and then give them their due process from across the border. They can go through whatever process to see if they deserve asylum in our country, instead of putting them up in five-star hotels, giving them food stamps and every other benefit of being an American. It's lunacy. It's the reason Donald Trump won the election. It is the reason Donald Trump won the election. And so I think the Trump administration should tell these judges to pound sand and go do what he was elected to do, and stop allowing them to try to muck up the works and slow down the process. Why are they doing that? Because they want these illegals to be here as long as possible. The influx of 20 million illegal aliens was part of the plan to dilute our people, to dilute our values, to totally confuse our elections, to take up the housing in America, which is why the housing costs are through the roof, to get on the government dole. I mean, and now to completely take over cities and usher in Sharia law. That's not an exaggeration. That's what they're doing. I used to think that was a conspiracy theory and an exaggeration. No, it's happening. So this is at the heart of the entire Trump election, and I'm encouraging the Trump administration to just press the gas. If you can't get relief from appellate courts or the Supreme Court, I know you've said you will follow what the courts say, but when one branch is outside of its authority, the other two branches have to push back. You have to say no. And the judiciary's been out of its authority and out of its constitutional jurisdiction for 80 years. They've been pushing the envelope, expanding their own power, stepping in where they don't belong. The judiciary is not a policy-making branch. The founder said that over and over again. It is no place to make policy. These are unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats, essentially. They're judges appointed by the president and approved by Congress to do a job, and they have no policy-making mandate from the American people. We don't elect them to do that. We elect the Congress and the president to make policy in this country. And the court has taken that over and convinced the American people that they have the final say. And even convinced, I mean, there are people out there right now that actually think the court is better suited for policy, that they're more neutral, that they're not partisan. How naive can you possibly be? That they're not partisan? Every judge on every bench at every level, local, state, federal, all of them are partisan. They all have belief systems. They all have things that they believe and a worldview and a way that they think the world should work. Every single one of them. They are not gods. They are not saints. They are certainly not angels. They're human beings just like you and me. And that's why you should be electing your judges at the state level in every state, so that you can at least question them. You can hold them accountable in the next election. And federal judges should have term limits. They should only be there for 6 to 10 years for an appointment, and perhaps be able to be reappointed if a new president wants to reappoint them once. And then that ought to be it. Two terms for judges. If it's good enough for our presidents, it's good enough for our judges. 2 terms, and you set the terms. I don't care if they're even 10 years each, so that they got 20 years on the bench, but that's it. Look, I think Justice Clarence Thomas is the greatest justice to ever serve in American history. When you factor in his life story, when you factor in the totality of his opinions and the things that he's done to stand against all the things that he to stand up against evil in so many different ways, there's not a justice in history that holds a candle to Justice Clarence Thomas. But I don't think Clarence Thomas should be on the court for 40 or 50 years. And he's now the longest serving justice on the court. I would hate to lose him for sure. I mean, he is fantastic, but you don't base your your system and what the Declaration calls organizing its powers in such forms, you don't base that on one person, because you have to recognize that for every justice like Justice Thomas that's been true to the Constitution and held true to his convictions, there's 5 others that sell out. There's 5 others that either have a faulty view of the Constitution or they don't care about the Constitution. They're going to give decisions based on what they want, or they're going to change their mind like a Justice Kennedy depending on what they have for breakfast. Apparently he had Cheerios, the year before Obergefell, and then had Fruit Loops the day that he decided Obergefell, because he completely reversed his opinion on that. So my point is that you have to make the system, which originally it was made for an understanding of Jeremiah 17:9, that the heart is evil, no man can know it. And therefore we make the rules and we set the system up knowing that even what we think is a good person, and maybe they serve well for 10 years, they've got evil in their heart that they don't even know is there. I've got evil in my heart you've got evil in you. So we don't want to give anybody this unaccountable 40 or 50 years in a position of such power. So I'm looking for ways to reduce the power of the court at the local level, and at the state level, and at the federal level. And let's get the decision-making power more and more into the hands of the elected representatives. The executive, the legislature, that's where those kind of decisions should be made. And I think everybody's seen evidence of it. We've watched for 10 months now the Trump administration, elected by the American people with a very clear agenda. There's nothing he is doing right now that he didn't campaign on over and over and over again and give 5-hour-long speeches about it. Everybody knew what Donald Trump was going to do when he got in office. And so there's no surprises here. And yet we've watched for 10 months the judiciary, unelected, not chosen by the American people, consistently, even at the lowest level of federal judge, try to undermine and overrule what the president has been doing. And not only the president, the Texas legislature has been overruled by a federal district judge, frankly, a friend of mine, a guy that I campaigned all over the state with, while we were running for Texas Supreme Court. And he started on the Supreme Court. Now he's a federal judge. And something about being elected or appointed for what they think is life, it's actually for good behavior, I guess goes to people's heads. I don't know. I'm shocked that he got this one wrong, but he, ruled against the redistricting plan that the Texas legislature did. Finally, we got a redistricting plan that was not racist, a non-racial redistricting plan. And I guess, this judge, just like all these others, wants a racially motivated redistricting plan. Now, I'm sure that he's going to argue, yeah, but that's what the previous court said. I was just following what the previous court said. I mean, your adherences and your oath is to the Constitution. We're supposed to not judge people based on the color of their skin. It's supposed to be content of character. It's supposed to be, draw those lines, and you can draw them based on voting history. Like, you can look blindly at the data on a neighborhood and know if it votes typically Republican or Democrat, and you can factor that into the redistricting because you're trying to pack Democrats into a district or pack Republicans into a district. Whoever's in charge gets to do that. It's been the way of the world since we've had a nation. That's called gerrymandering. Elbridge Gerry, signer of the Declaration of Independence, was the one that mastered that art. So it's been around 250 years. But that's based on voting data that has nothing to do with color of skin, and that's okay. But what they want, they meaning these judges, they want racial districts. They want you to guarantee electing a white person or a black person or a brown person or a red person or yellow. That is so wrong and evil. And I thought we were moving away from that, not towards it. And now we have judges moving towards it. We have a movement now from the right that is moving towards this racist nonsense. They need to be silenced, not by the government, but by us, by not platforming them and not magnifying their voices. That's why you won't hear me say that one particular young man's name. I just call him the Nazi twerp. That's who he is. That's what he is. He claims to be the first, a Nazi, and he exhibits the second every time he opens his mouth. So we've got to get better at moving away from racism and towards being a colorblind society that says we're not judging each other based on color of skin. And the courts are fighting us every step of the way. All right, there were several other court decisions, but I don't have them in front of me and I can't remember all of them. But bottom line is the courts are out of control. Now, solutions. How do we do this? Well, a couple of ways. There's the long-term solution. The proper constitutional solution is to do constitutional amendments overruling any Supreme Court decisions that were against the Constitution or that the American people just disagree with. That's what the amendment process is all about. So, of course, this comes back to us using Article 5, actually doing amendments without Congress, only the states involved here. And you need 34 states to ask for the meeting to propose these amendments. And then you got to have 26 states propose the amendment. And then you got to get 38 states to ratify the amendment. So it's a tough process. It's as my friend Mark Meckler says, the most muscular act in a constitutional republic. Hardest thing to do. And we're on our way. We got 20 states that have called for the meeting. And we need 14 more that'll say, yeah, we want to meet. We want to talk about this. And then have the meeting, talk about it, have state legislatures from across the country come together, talk about it, debate it, take months to do it. Everybody's going to be watching. There's no way to cheat. There's no way to lie. It's all going to be public, and we're going to watch every step of what they're doing. And the entire nation is going to get a constitution lesson out of it. And then, Lord willing, they will propose some structural amendments. You get 26 states to propose stripping power from the feds. Put them back in their box to only do the things they're supposed to be doing. Stripping power from the courts. Put them back in their box to only do the things they're supposed to be doing. And get the power back to the state level and the state legislatures. That's the way it should be, and that's the only solution long-term for putting the court back in their proper place. Now, short-term, there's a few things we can do. We can continue to appeal and just pray that we've got 5 out of 9 votes that will support overruling these district judges that have taken the law into their own hands and made up the law and overruled the Constitution and overruled the president. That's a gamble. I mean, that is literally take the dice and roll them. That is a crapshoot for sure, because you really only have 2 justices that are almost, I'd say 100% constitutional, but I'm sure they've gotten it wrong at some point in history. But Sam Alito and Clarence Thomas, the only ones you can count on these kind of cases. And then hopefully we can cobble together 3 of the other 4 Republicans, depending on the day and depending on the issue. But that's all, man. That's risky, guys. That's like, that's putting the fate of the republic into a casino situation. And so I'm for doing the amendments. That's the way to do it long term. And then the last thing, kind of the last bastion of hope, is for the president just to press forward and duke it out at the higher court level, but just refuse to comply with these district judges and say they're out of line. They have no authority over me. If the Supreme Court tells me not to do it, I won't do it. But these district judges, I'm not going to let one federal judge out of the entire federal judiciary of roughly 1,000 judges. I'm not going to let that one judge make policy for the country. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to let that one judge overturn a national election that was crystal clear, landslide election. I'm not going to let him do it. And so he'll definitely be criticized for that. People will say that he's being authoritarian in doing that, but Andrew Jackson did it. I mean, why not say, nice opinion, now let me see you enforce it? I just think we're going to end up having to do that, or he's going to be slowed down for the next 3 years to the point that, it's going to become very difficult to get the big issues done. All right, well, that was my main beef tonight, was the courts. There's a lot of other headlines we could talk about, but I'm going to head over to the chat and see if you guys have topics that you would like to talk about. I'll let you pick what we cover. Okay, let's see. Yeah, excellent point. Become a Constitution coach and learn these things and teach other people these things, because that's, in the long run, we have to raise the civic literacy and the understanding of the proper role of the courts, or else people will just keep falling for it. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so the shutdown, that's a good point. I should mention that. Finally the shutdown is over. Anybody notice any difference? Not really. It was a perfect example of why the federal government is doing all of these things that it shouldn't be doing in the first place. Most people don't feel the benefit or the detriment of the federal government doing those things, but we pay for it. So I guess we do feel the detriment because we pay the bills for it to happen. And so there's so much of what the federal government's doing that should just go away. And I will say one of the good things that came from the shutdown is a light was shown on the excess in some of these areas, like, for instance, SNAP and the food stamps and all the welfare. And so all of this, waste and fraud was finally talked about. I mean, they've known it was going on. It's just it gave us an opportunity to shine a light on it. So just under 200,000 dead people getting those benefits, 500,000 people getting double benefits, and nobody should be getting that from the federal government. That should all be state-run, state-funded. You should not be sending any of your money to the federal government to help poor people. That is not a federal government role. It's not even a government role. It's a local role, church role, individual role. But if you're going to do it through government, then you should do it to the local and state level so you have a better chance of holding people accountable and making sure the money's getting to the people that actually need it. So I do think that's a good thing that was all a light was shown on that. Not only that it showed the waste and fraud, and here's where I think the Trump administration could do a better job, rather than just saying we're gonna find the fraud and abuse and get rid of that. They should be saying, see, the program doesn't work. See, this is why it shouldn't be done at the Department of Agriculture level. That's where all this food stamp stuff happens. Why? There should be no Department of Agriculture. So we should be saying this proves that Elon Musk was right, that Doge had it right, and all of this waste and abuse needs to go away. Healthcare is not constitutionally in the jurisdiction of the federal government at all. Zip, zero, nada. And it's approaching 50% of the federal budget. So we could wipe out half of the federal budget overnight by simply becoming constitutional on that one issue. That's what the Trump administration should be saying. That's what Brooke Rollins at Department of Agriculture should be saying. That's what all of these people that are finding all this waste, fraud, and abuse should be saying. Not, we're going to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to do government better than the Democrats did, which is what Republicans always seem to say. They should be saying, we're going to get rid of the waste, fraud, and abuse and the ability to add waste, fraud, and abuse. We're going to get rid of the ability for this program to be abused by getting rid of it. We're going to completely get rid of it, send it back to the states and the local level. There'll be some waste, fraud, and abuse at the state and local level, but it won't be near what's happening at the federal level because of the size of the dollars being dealt with and the size of the agency and the distance from the people that are actually being helped and the people that are actually paying the bill. Your question was more to the question of how do you end up shutting down the federal government? I think I can't find your question now, but it was how does the federal government shut down? And then what's the process for opening again? No, I'm not closely related to Alfred Hitchcock. Yes, I've seen several of his movies. That's pretty good. It's basically they don't really shut down. What they do is they freeze certain departments until the budget bill finally gets passed, until there's finally an agreement between the Senate and the House and the president signs it. And so they keep running and they keep running all the what they call essential, which to me that should be the test. If it's not essential, it shouldn't exist at the federal level. And then everybody gets back pay. So all of these people that have had a 2-month vacation, they're all going to get paid for that. They're going to get paid to have stayed home for the last 2 months. So, clearly no actual winners in this except the federal employees, which is how it tends to work. Okay. Yeah, that's actually, Nicholas, that's exactly what I'm saying. Look at everything that was not essential during the shutdown and then go actually shut it down. That's what should be done. Yeah. Yeah, that's good, Alex. Trump could probably do that. Go ahead, make my day. That would be pretty good. Actually, Laura, impeaching the rogue federal judges is on the table. That absolutely should be done. The founders did it. Why would we not impeach someone for abusing their powers? We absolutely should do that. Yeah, no, you're right, Luke. The Nazi twerp actually, people that claim this kid is a Christian and that he's trying to bring young men back to Christianity, he's literally telling them not to read the Bible. I don't know about you, but I've never seen that on any evangelist's, pamphlet. Okay, I don't remember ever having anyone in the Christian evangelism world say, "Let me tell you, the best way to get close to God is to not read the Bible." Yeah, that's how much of a twerp this kid is. Let's see. That's all the questions I see. Lashley, do you see any questions I skipped that I need to answer?
See one by Kyle Wilcrow. How do you educate the flip-flop people saying one thing the next one day and the opposite thing the next?
Oh, Kyle, that's a good question, man. So Kyle asked, how do you educate the flip-flop people saying one thing one day, the opposite thing the next day? I think, honestly, Kyle, it's more of a being driven by emotion rather than logic issue. So I think that's you got a lot of people right now that they're just swinging from one end to the other because they're angry. I get that part. They're tired of being called every name in the book. They're tired of the abuse. They're tired of the bad and the ugly things that we're talking about. And so I think we have to. The only way we're going to educate them and move them out of emotion into logic and making better decisions about who they support. And there's a lot of examples we could give on this. Okay, so it's like one example would be throwing a congressman or somebody under the bus for one wrong move when they've been with us 99% of the time. They disagree with us one time, or they disagree with Trump one time, and all of a sudden they're the bad guy. That's silly. That's emotional. That's not thinking long term. It's naive about the system itself, right? So I think honestly, I mean, I know I'm always sounding like a broken record with the solution, but the solution really is to get them into our Constitution classes, get them into a local group that is doing biblical citizenship, constitutional life, rebuilding liberty, going through all these courses, because I guarantee you these courses will teach you to think logically. It will give you a strong understanding of the right way to govern under a constitutional republic, and it will give you action steps to take that'll keep you from just being angry all the time. It'll give you action steps to be able to go out there and make a difference, and that helps to move us from emotion into logic and into just doing our duty and leaving the results up to God, and not constantly being up or down or whatever it might be. And granted, I mean that sounds self-serving because I'm saying go take our classes at Patriot Academy, but they're free, so it's not money self-serving. It is self-serving from the standpoint of I want to save the republic, and I want more people to not flip-flop back and forth, and that includes members of Congress. And that may be what you were referring to, Kyle, is more of the elected officials, public servants that are flip-flopping on things. But it begins with their education. We've got a significant vacuum of civic literacy in the country. And so even in our public servants, all of us, I'm ignorant. There's definitely areas of public policy that I have massive gaps that I'm totally ignorant on. And I usually, when somebody asks a question on those things, I'll say that's not my area of expertise. I'll try to get a guest on, or I'll try to do some homework. So when I say we have public servants who are ignorant about the principles, I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as a fact. Ignorance is just simply not knowing. It doesn't mean they're stupid. It means they don't know. They haven't gone through these Constitution classes. They haven't studied the origin of the principles of liberty. They aren't. They're just not steeped in this stuff, and some of this stuff takes time. You look at guys that are you consider to be brilliant on these issues. Charlie Kirk certainly was. Ben Shapiro. And you think about how off the cuff they can take questions and field them and be able to speak intelligently about such a broad range of issues. These are people that have devoted their lives to studying these things. So they have read. I remember Ben Shapiro telling the Patriot Academy students, read all the books. He said, that's my advice to you. Read all the books. And he literally read 10,000 books by the time he was 30. Charlie Kirk was a voracious reader and constantly studying and calling and asking and going and diving into these things with people that understood them. Frank Turek coaching him on even the way to answer questions and the apologetics thing, and so many other people that he had in his life that were doing that. So it takes effort to not be ignorant about these things. And so I would challenge all of the people right now. We're really pushing for 10,000 candidates to flood the zone and run for county commissioner, county judge, city council, water district, school board, state legislature, all of it. And I would challenge all of you that are running, or if you're serving in a position right now, become a voracious reader about the issues that you are dealing with. And, I know I'm talking about this all the time because we're feeling the pain of it. But at the local level, if you're on a commissioner's court, you need to be studying property rights, studying the origin of property rights, studying how the left took over so many of our institutions in America and changed the perception of who should decide what to do with property, and how much of the decision-making power is no longer left to the landowner and is now given to government bureaucrats to do those things. You should be studying all of the environmental nonsense, all of this impervious cover stuff and the watershed nonsense. And when I say nonsense, I mean it. They have created a perception that you can, charge landowners all these, and I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating when I say tens of thousands, over $100,000 in many cases, to do these studies about water availability and where the runoff's going to go and all of that in scenarios where the study makes not one scintilla of difference, and all of the bureaucratic requirements for the holding ponds and everything else, all of it makes no difference whatsoever in impact on the neighbors. None. But it cost a boatload of money and time and delays. So if you're a county commissioner, I would recommend that you study the studies that those things were based on. It's what I did. When I started being told I had to spend all this extra money and we were getting delayed and we had to ask permission to do all these things, I went back and read the studies. I went back and looked at how this impervious cover thing happened. And it's just like the climate hoax. It started in 1980, and it started in cities like Austin with these left-wing radical environmentalists that wanted to stop anybody from building a house or building a shopping center or doing anything that was actually progress and that would improve quality of life. They wanted to stop all of it. So they made up all this stuff and they created all of these scenarios. And they did the same thing with the Endangered Species Act. They started finding bugs and beetles and warblers and maggots and flies. I'm not exaggerating. It's not the American wolf. It's not the bald eagle. It's not what they're using. They're using literally maggots to stop people from building. It is a travesty. It is an absolute infringement on liberty. It is killing the American dream in the pursuit of happiness. And it's all based on shoddy science. And so if you're on a water district or you're on a city council or you're on a county commission, you need to take the time to study those things. And I am asking, think tanks and others to help by putting together white papers and studies that will help us educate people on this so that we can stop the infringement on our liberty. So that's a long, Kyle, answer to your question, but it's the same answer to all of the problems we're facing. Civic and biblical ignorance is the petri dish where bad government grows, and civic and biblical literacy is the solution. And that means all of us need to be studying and learning and helping others learn. I need to do a better job of articulating those things. I need to do a better job of having it off the top of my head to be able to quote those things. All of us need to be studying these things in order to prevent this infringement on our liberty. Okay, so let's see. I think, yeah, Amy, exactly right. Timothy says, study to show thyself approved. That is what we need to be doing. 100%. Yeah, hosting classes leads to more everyday people running for office and getting educated and being able to sharpen each other on these things. Oh, I love Colonial Williamsburg, Alex. Good place. Yeah, I don't mind saying Candace's name because she's already the number one podcast in the world thanks to all of her lies and just crazy stuff she's doing. Unfortunately, that stuff's popular. Now she's laughing all the way to the bank, folks. I mean, she knows this is what's happening is she's getting all the clicks. It's all clickbait stuff. And she's getting the clicks because she's getting all the conspiracy theorists to follow her. And then she's getting good people to follow just to be able to keep up with the crazy stuff she's saying so that they can counter it. Now, I refuse. Like, I won't click on a single one of her videos because I don't want to add to her numbers. But I do follow on social media a whole lot of people that are critiquing her and pointing out just how nuts she has become. She's lost it. I mean, totally lost it. Now, I will say, my friend Carol Swaim, who I greatly respect, she's a brilliant woman that has a great heart. And she posted the other day something that kind of convicted me a little bit. She was like, hey, we need to be praying for Candace, and we need to be finding people that still know her well and that can pour into her and do an intervention and not just criticizing her, because there's a spiritual war going on here and something has taken over that gal's mind. And so I think Carol's right. We should be absolutely doing that. I mean, Candace used to be an absolute force for good and an incredible voice for, bringing reason to the debate. And unfortunately, it has gone off the rails. So, yep, absolutely, no doubt. All right, I think that's it. I got to jump over and do Flashpoint, everybody. Thank you for joining me in the tavern this week. I'll try to remember my mug next week. I feel like this is a wimpy mug. It's like doesn't have that Viking look, and feeling like I'm really in a tavern from the Revolution. This feels like I don't know, at some foo-foo coffee house down the road. So not going to happen again. Next week, I'll have my tavern mug. All right, everybody have a great week.